We just heard from star of the film Idris Elba, Mandela Long Walk to Freedom, which James did back in December, the day before Mandela passed away during the premiere here in London. Let's talk about the film. I mean, his performance, I'll give you my opinion quickly. I think he's absolutely incredible. And to take on a role like that, I think as well, of someone who's so iconic, so important to history and still for so many people, is a brave thing to do. And I think he does it absolute justice. I think he's absolutely mind-blowing in it.
And I think actually Idris Elba has relished that challenge as well. Hopefully you heard it in the interview. I definitely saw it when I was speaking to him, is that he's, all the research and the pressure that came with playing someone totally out of his comfort zone, he's actually really enjoyed that and totally risen to the occasion as well, because it's a great performance. He doesn't look the most like Nelson Mandela. There are moments perhaps when the voice goes off a little bit, but what he does is bring the character to life. Very animated and very passionate. And like I said earlier, I think crucially for the wider career of Idris Elba, it shows him convincingly doing something very different to what we've seen him do before. So it's a big moment in his career. Naima Harris too, as well.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, she's sort of getting a little bit forgotten about, but she plays Winnie Mandela. But a great performance. She always gives great performances, but really fiery and full of conviction.
Again, I think it shows her in a light that we've never seen in terms of the depth of a character as well, and also the film covers such a long period of time as well, and for both actors, the way that those characters change and develop over the years and stuff, it's an amazing transformation.
But I think also if there are problems, it's probably to do with that, actually, the fact that there is just so much going on in this. It's about important events in the history of South Africa, but what I didn't feel I got to know about was really the personality of Nelson Mandela. Maybe in the earlier years, like I said, when we learn about him being a boxer and some of the things that he did when he was a younger guy, things that we don't know so much about because he wasn't on TV the whole time then. But actually, after that, it does seem to be ticking a few boxes in terms of historical events in South Africa's history at the expense of really getting to know what made this guy tick, what gave him his drive. And the history does seem to take over too much of the story, whereas actually I wanted some personality to come into the story. And clearly they wanted to do that. You heard that in the interview. Their intentions were for that not to happen. But I think it has happened because there's so much to cram into this movie. The book that it's based on is 784 pages long.
Wow.
Peter Jackson has made will have made three 2.5-hour films out of The Hobbit. That's only 300 odd pages. But this is 2.5 hours out of 784 pages. And the simple answer is, and I think I've probably said this about other movies, is that it's a miniseries, really. It's, 6-part miniseries, if not more. And then you can get everything in there. I don't think you can actually do it justice in 2.5 hours. And you have things like the Sharpeville Massacre, which is one of the key moments in 20th century South African history. It's over and done with in about 2 minutes. And it's very powerful when it's on screen, but you just think, that warrants more than that. Surely there are so many bits in this which are really important moments that warrant more than the screen time they actually get. But they couldn't have any more, because otherwise we would be watching a film that goes on for 6 or 7 hours. So there's stuff missing, and I think the main stuff that's missing really is the personality, and it does feel a little bit like a history lesson in parts, and that's not what they wanted to do.
You mentioned about the fact we kind of Naima Harris as well, and I just think as well they are two incredibly like you say, strong characters that you get little tastes and little flutterings of the attraction between the pair of them and what drew them together and what kept them together and then what drew them apart. I wanted more of that side of things as well. I
think with a story this big, what you do is you either make a movie about one element of it, and if you remember Invictus that came out with Morgan Freeman and Matt Damon, which wasn't about apartheid particularly, but although that was clearly a backdrop to the movie, but it was about the Rugby World Cup and the rugby match, and that focused on that as to tell the story. So a shorter period of time, and it told you about South Africa and South Africa's history and the history of apartheid in the context of this rugby match. And I think that's a better way of doing it, taking a moment and focusing the whole film on that moment rather than taking the whole story, 50, 60 years, whatever it is,
trying to hit marks
and
then
trying to cram that all in. And I think that's the problem with the film. And actually, if you went back to I don't know, the 1980s, when things like Gandhi were winning big at the Oscars, actually, probably then this would have felt right. It does feel like an old Richard Attenborough epic, which could have cleaned up at the Oscars in 1982. But I think in 2013 or 2014 now as it is, it does feel a little straightforward and pedestrian. And they were clearly influenced by movies like Gandhi, and I think the director has said that, classic movie. But it perhaps feels a little dated in the way that it's presented. Just that idea of here's everything, the end. I think that does feel a little dated now.
It's quite interesting because the obviously it was based on the book screenplay written by William Nicholson, who he's done a similar thing with, like you mentioned about it being a mini-series on Martin Luther King. He did a TV movie based on him. He's got that experience as well.
Yeah.
He did stuff like Gladiator as well. So, in terms of those big characters and being able to tell the story as well, see the personality and stuff, there's history of him being able to do that.
But why certain stories get made as movies and why certain stories get made as miniseries, well, that's, I'm sure Harvey Weinstein can tell us that. There's all kinds of reasons. I understand that. But I think just as a viewer, I would have preferred it. I think they could have achieved everything that they wanted to achieve if they'd had longer, actually. Yeah. And you can't really ask for much longer than 2.5 hours, 3 hours in a movie. So therefore, it would have worked better on the telly, really.